look good. I mean, to have already grown back and bigger than it was before. It's still but I'm not saying no, but for it to come back so aggressively, so short term.
Ben, can you unmute me? Ben, I got the live stream going, but I muted their mic.
Who was your fourth?
Good.
There we go.
Pretty nothing really, but it was all right.
Yeah.
Got out and did a nice hike with Finn.
Yeah.
How about you?
Did Seminole.
Oh, did you? Oh, is that the time of year?
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
you got that taken care of, right?
Yep, got it marked again for another year.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's highlighted on your calendar,
Oh,
isn't it?
yeah. Summer starts now.
Got that taken care of. Oh, man.
It's hot and it's dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
I
goodness.
have neighbors who live across the street who are the hosts, camp hosts. And they said it's prior, it was just so windy, they couldn't keep anything down.
Yeah.
So,
That was nice. It was not that windy. But the water is way down. So as with the rest of Wyoming, the
Right.
water is just crushed.
yeah.
I saw on the Snake River, they're down 22% from the lowest they've ever recorded.
Down an additional 20. Oh
22%.
my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, they think Jackson Lake will have 10% of its capacity by the end of the year.
Are they running it? Are
Yeah,
guides
'cause they-
running
yeah,
it?
and the Palisades will have 5%. If the papers to be believed.
Wow.
That's- Yeah, nothing in the spring, either fall that they normally get, the wet stuff, and so everything that comes just soaks up, you know. Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, you don't want anything to do on the weekend in Jackson, what I've been told. Yeah.
Motel 6. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Get it done, Ben.
Do you have a lot of guests?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I operate an Airbnb.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I said to Matt. Yeah.
Hi, good, how are you doing? Yeah. Thought for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, but they're also really tough. Right. No. Right.
So know a young mom whose two kids got COVID from a local, what I think, daycare.
The kids got it too. Oh my God.
I don't know if she got it, but she got it.
Yes, sir.
And they're not at least 12 years of age, obviously, so they don't vaccinate it.
Yeah.
Pete,
Yes, sir.
just to let you know, the mics are hot.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see that division.
Thank you.
I don't know, mine looks 3 inches thick.
You can tell she's from a large family.
That Hershey candy bar was split in 2 little pieces.
Right, so they better be even. My mom could cut a cookie into 10.
Right? You know, one of those little trident pieces of gum, that could be divided to maybe just like this. Why bother?
I'm going to ask to add this morning.
Come on, Jennifer.
It's to adjust the MOU with the city to reflect the decrease in available funds from the 13.5 to the 12.4. And we have, you don't have to go to repeat of that pre-hearing conference state is today.
Yeah.
And it's just to identify witnesses and exhibits and all of those things
Okay.
prior to the hearings on the 19th.
Okay.
So I just, when we go today, I just want to be able to tell them, we have this MOU. I just drafted it this morning. I talked to Bob this morning and sent it to him, and he was going to look it over. But he didn't indicate that he had it at his funds.
Okay, and this is the result of the change in legislation from 2.76% or,
No, it's because the construction for Wi-Fi were initially miscalculated to include things that shouldn't have been included. So they, as part of the process through industrial siting, they got a notice of deficiency about some other information they had to provide. At the same time, they provided information about the miscalculation, and industrial siting reviewed it all and agreed that it was a miscalculation and just subsequently reduced.
okay,
So there was some movement
Yeah.
both directions on different issues. But in the end, the net was lower.
Yeah, and it was something, they had included something in the construction funds initially that shouldn't have been included. And so it made that initial unavailable amount higher.
Yeah.
But in the end, when it all washed through,
It
the
comes
net
down,
was a reduction.
yes.
Jackie, are you ready to go? David, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the July 6th Albany County Commission meeting. Hope you had a wonderful 4th of July. And we'll get going right away. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Commissioner Ibarra,
Here.
Commissioner Richardson,
Here,
and Commissioner Gosar is also here. Like, if you join me to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, public hearing. So the first public hearing is the transfer of retail liquor license from Home Base Properties LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge to Waikolo Lodge LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge. Would anybody like to testify in the public hearing for the transfer of the retail liquor license?
That's me, and I'm here with any questions.
Okay. You bet. Anybody online like to comment? Last call for comments for the transfer of the retail liquor license from Home Base Properties LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge to Waikolo Lodge LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge. Entertain a motion to close that public hearing.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next, like to open up the public hearing for the Vista Beam Hornsby Road Tower Permit Application LUCT-04-20. Would anybody like to testify on behalf of the Vista Beam Hornsby Road Tower Permit Application LUCT-04-20? How about anybody online? Last call for the comments for the Vista Beam. Entertain a motion to close the public hearing, please.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. I'd now like to open up the public hearing for amendments to the Albany County zoning resolution requiring special standards for development of property within the dedication plat of Centennial. Would anybody like to comment here in person about the amendments to the dedication plat of Centennial? How about online? And final call. Entertain a motion to close that public hearing, please.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 4, comments from the public. Would anybody like to make it? David, come on up, please.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I just want to introduce you to Jory Unverzot. Unverzot. So he's got a lot of letters in his name, make it a little confusing. Kind of like mine, if you look at the
There at the end there.
German stuff, but he's our addressing coordinator now. He's been with us for a couple weeks now, 4 weeks now. Doing a great job, helping us out with some GIS stuff and addressing and signage. And so we're gonna get that program turned around and get some things going for the county and for the residents. So just want to introduce you to him. So.
George, welcome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yeah, Chad, please.
Well, Chad Dingus, Albany County Fire Warden. I just wanted to quickly address concerns about the potential for fire restrictions in the county. About a week and a half ago, 10 days ago, we were looking at a situation where we were strongly considering moving into some sort of restrictions in the county. The atmospheric conditions have changed dramatically in that time, and we are no longer meeting any of the criteria that would cause us for concern at this point. It's something that we monitor day to day. And look at the numbers and see where we're at. But as it stands right now, we're in pretty good shape. And if something changed with that, I will certainly let you know. Is there any questions about that? Or
On the forest, are they still in
the forest is in stage 1 restriction. I had a discussion with the BLM this morning, and the BLM is going to enter into restrictions only under portions of their district and not probably in Carbon or Albany County. So Forest Service will still be restrictions, but the BLM and the county will not be, at least moving forward right now. So we'll keep a close eye on it. And if we need to do it, I'll get with them and we'll probably all jump in together at that point.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. Any other comments here in person? And then we'll go online. Okay. Sarah, looks like you have your hand up. Good morning. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Sarah Gorin. I'm the president of Albany County Clean Water Advocates, and I'm speaking today for that organization. At this public comment time, before you get to the discussion of drinking water protection regulations later on your agenda, we would like to address the staff comment that suggested delay. While that suggestion to update the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan first and update the regs second seems kind of logical at first glance, it ignores the reality of what has been happening or not happening with drinking water protection. It has now been 2 full years since the county dropped its enforcement action against the former Tumbleweed gas station in favor of enacting stronger regulations to protect our drinking water. But that effort to enact the stronger regulations stalled out completely until the new 2021 County Commission reactivated it and began work on the proposed regulations that are before you later today. The County Aquifer Protection Plan recommends updates every 2 years, but nothing has happened for a decade. Even with renewed cooperation between the city and county, a protection plan update is a year or more in the future. While meantime, development pressure on the Aquifer Protection Overlay Zone and its western boundary continues to increase. Every development that takes place builds in a source of pollution. It may be small, but it all adds up. If eventually the pollution adds up to exceeding a drinking water standard, you can't back up the train. It would have to be treated, the cost of which would be borne by homeowners or the community at large. We are incredibly fortunate here to have a relatively clean and abundant water supply. I heard you before the meeting starting talking about how there are going to be water shortages in other places in the West. This water supply is essential to the economic viability and quality of life in our community. So the responsible course of action is to keep it that way, and we respectfully urge you to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to make a public comment? Last call for public comment. I entertain a motion to close the public comment period, please.
I move that we close the public comment period.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, all those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 5, disclosures. Commissioner Barra, any disclosures?
I have none.
Commissioner Richardson?
I have none.
And none for me. Item 6, consideration of changes to the agenda. Jennifer, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar. I would like to add an agenda item for it's a first amendment to the memorandum of understanding between you as the Board of Commissioners for Albany County and the City of Laramie for distribution of the Rail Tie Wind Project Impact Assistance Funds. And this amendment is as a result of the reduction in available funds from Industrial Siting Commission.
Okay, can we add that at 25A there towards the end? Or is there some other time you'd like to add it?
That should be fine. The only
This is-
potential disclaimer I have to that is I have to leave at noon
Okay,
for another meeting.
where would you like to add it? There's a better question.
Wherever you would like is fine.
Okay.
About 8A.
Let's do that. 8A. Sorry, Jackie, for messing up the notes there.
And also, we would like to remove item number 20 from this agenda. I didn't have enough time to do the research prior to this meeting, but we'll put it on your next agenda.
Okay. So, thanks, Jennifer. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Item 7, approval of the consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve it unless somebody would like to pull something out from it.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, all those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 8, introduce Jake Schneider, civil engineer, and Murray Schroeder, branch manager from WWC Engineering as new contract engineers for the county.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our new county engineer firm that's going to be working with the Albany County. We meaning Jennifer, Kayla, myself, and both Jacob and Murray had the opportunity to sit down and meet and review what our procedures are. I know that Adam was very instrumental in setting up an email address for them. And so at this time, Jacob and Murray, welcome to Albany County.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for replying to the RFP and thanks for being willing to do the work. It's in my 2.5 years been pretty varied work. So thanks for being here. If you have anything that you'd like to talk with us about or just introduce your company and you guys.
Yeah, I'm Jake Schneider with WWC Engineering. This is Murray Schroeder. He's our branch manager here in Laramie. And we have quite a diverse group of folks in our business that we should be able to provide the county a very diverse opportunity to meet the needs. We thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think Bill was able to work with you guys, if he hasn't already, to some of the projects that are in place, you know,
Yeah.
like the door locks and the chiller and all that stuff.
Yeah, he's been forwarded me several emails already, and he said he'd be more than willing to help us as we kind of transition.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, and now that you have county emails, there's no eluding us, huh?
No, open and transparent.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. Thank you. 8A is the Rail Tie Assistance Funds MOU. Jennifer, please.
Morning again, commissioners. So as I mentioned, this is an amendment to the first MOU that we did to adjust the amount of available funds from $13.5 million to $12.4 million. We had an agreement with the city that the county, because the city's requests were so minimal as compared to ours, that the county would absorb that reduction from industrial siding. And I worked with Sheriff Applehands and Megan Getz, who is representing Albany County Fire District number 1, who is included under our county umbrella. And we worked out that reduction and how we're going to handle it internally. So our pre-hearing statement was filed last week on Thursday and included the $12.4 million, but this is just to finalize it so we can submit the amendment to the MOU. So there's no question for industrial siding about how that change is affecting the distribution or the requested distribution of funds between the city and the county.
Thanks, Jennifer. Commissioners, any questions?
Nope.
I'd entertain a motion for the MOU with the Board of Commissioners and the City of Laramie for Rail Tie Wind Project and Impact Assistance Funds.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve amendment number 1, the MOU between the Albany County Board of Commissioners and the City of Laramie for Rail Tie Wind Project Impact Assistance Fund. As presented.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thanks, Jennifer. 9, present for approval Courthouse Public Art Selection Committee's recommendation for public art in the courthouse north entry. Laura, good morning.
Good
The floor is
morning.
yours, please.
I'm gonna give you. So you have a proposal.
You can get-
Okay, well, this is an exciting moment. So in front of you is the selection committee's selection of 4 proposals that were presented to the committee on June 21st. We went through, the artists presented their proposals, and then the committee interviewed each artist, and the selection was made unanimously here for this project called Current, which is an artist team out of Indianapolis, Quincy Owens and Luke Crawley. And what you'll see is that, so the project scope and narrative is really about waterways and how water sort of sustains life. And that it also, on a sort of a macro level and then on a microscopic level, it's also the air we breathe also sustains life. And that every 6 years, these oxygen molecules get evenly dispensed throughout the atmosphere around the earth. It's really kind of poetic. But they're basing this on the Laramie River. So what they are proposing is sort of a floating sculpture here in the entranceway of the courthouse that you'll see is made out of steel and acrylic. So there are like what you see made out of the acrylic and steel are sort of these like gems that represent air particles, and also they could be boulders, a bunch of different things that will be lit up through some lighting features as well. So they'll have cast some really lovely colorful shadows on the walls. And this will sort of float above the entranceway of the courthouse. And then there's a corresponding painting that will be on the stairway so when you go up the stairs, so there's like a 8-foot by 4-foot painting of the Laramie riverbed that will be on the wall. So it's actually, it'll be hung on the wall. So that is the idea. It's incredibly dynamic. It's really exciting, colorful, and while also being, sort of site specific, tied to our region. So that's the proposed project that the selection committee thought would be amazing for this space. So I'm happy to take some questions, whatever you all think.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So Laura, these diagrams you were
Yes.
giving us here, are these the colors that we can be expecting as far as the gems and the actual metal for the current?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the blues and purples and
Right. So it's very cool colors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've talked to a couple different engineers about this project already to ensure that it, could be done. Because that was certainly a question. Bill sat in on the selection committee as well. But they also have money built into their budget for engineering questions, because that's something that's a big part of this, because it's obviously a structure that will be installed above.
It needs to be able to hang there.
Right. It actually won't be very heavy. The steel bars, I think, are 3 to 5 pounds each. And then the actual acrylic gems and steel structures wouldn't also be very heavy. But we still need to be certain that it would stay. But that's part of what would happen next and sort of the planning phases for them. So
Because it's tubing, there's lots of air.
what's that?
It's tubing,
Yeah.
there's lots of air.
Right.
It's not heavy.
And I think I read in here, there's some lighting involved too,
Yes.
which is really interesting to me. Could
Yes.
you explain it a little bit, Laura, please?
Yeah, so the lighting, they explain it as like they're going to install additional lighting that will be positioned so it hits the gems.
Yeah.
So then there's some, light on the walls that are primarily white, or all white currently. So that'll be really fun. I think the work that they submitted as their examples prior to creating a proposal were all light-based as well. So they work a lot with light, they work a lot with color, which I think is one of the reasons the selection committee was so attracted to them, because they really have dynamic pieces that they create that are very vibrant and exciting. Actually, 3 members of the selection committee here.
But yeah, on page 6, the diagram shows that the tubing might hinder the use of the handrail. Is that
No, so I
accurate,
think
or-
that's just the way that this is photoshopped. So
okay?
what they had proposed is that the tubing would be attached to the railings on the outside.
Correct.
But we're not sure that that's actually possible. So that we've already talked to them a little bit about maybe moving it down to the wall. So, because it's going to attach to the wall with the elevator on one side.
Uh-huh.
And then on the other side, it would either attach to the railing or it would attach to the wall. Yeah.
Or even a
Depending
little
on-
bit of both.
or a little bit of both, depending on what code allows us to do. Yeah, but it wouldn't hinder the use of the rail line.
Okay.
And just for context, for people who weren't following along, how many people, or how many designs were submitted for this? And
So we started, this has been like a 6-month process. So we had 135 artists submitted just there for the RFQ, for the request for qualifications. And the selection committee narrowed that down to 4 artists and artist teams. And so those 4 artists and artist teams submitted proposals. So they had 12 weeks to develop a proposal, and then they submitted a proposal, and we did a full day of interviewing and proposals, presentations with those teams and artists. And then the committee selected this one to move forward. So
awesome. Well,
yeah, so it was a really great and really fun process. Lots of hours by the committee, which was really great for them to commit that time and energy and trying to figure out something really cool for the courthouse. And I think this is pretty cool.
Yes, it's very cool. Yeah. Laura, do the artists have anything similar to this somewhere else?
No, actually, so this would be super unique, which is one of the reasons, again, the committee was attracted to this, because while they do work sort of similar, like in terms of the light and color, this would be very, very unique. So.
any other questions? I'd entertain a motion for item number 9, if you would, please.
I move that we approve the Public Art Selection Committee's recommendation for public art in the courthouse north entry.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, all opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Laura, thank you for your work. Thank you, committee members, for your work. That's a lot of work, 135 down to 4,
Yeah.
down to this
Down
project.
to 1.
And I just have to give you a little more feedback. I had somebody come from Kansas City, traveling through town, and stopped an extra day because the art in Laramie was so interesting to them. And this will be another place to stop and see. And so, people don't think of art as economically driving, but this one for sure was. And I know anecdotal is not something you should base anything on, but some people came and said, this is a really cool community and what great artists. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great to hear. Well, yeah, it definitely is. It certainly is connected to economic development, and it's great that that's being recognized too. So this is going to be awesome. I think this is going to be a draw for a lot of people too. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
do we know, if you might know this, if there's a sort of an art guide for Laramie and Albany County? I mean, you have the Lincoln Monument up there. There's all kinds of stuff everywhere. And I'm curious if anybody's ever done that. There's a ton of art at the university.
yeah, there's not a completely comprehensive guide. That's certainly something LPAC would like to do at some point when we have the capacity to do so, is create something like that, because it's really important for us. That's a thing we're working on right now, is just also like reinvigorating like the mural project information, because there used to be an audio tour. There's now no longer an audio tour. So things like that, where we really have to assess, what's out there, and getting people that information is really important, because that's part of it. Otherwise it's just there, which is lovely, but it's nice to have some context as well. So.
Well, there's a distinct possibility that could fit within the tourism board's mandates. They sort of have rules that they have to follow when they spend lodging tax dollars, and it's all related to promoting Laramie. But if someone who's really interested in art, if that becomes a marketing tool for the tourism board. I've been to places like Seattle, I've been to lots of places where you can basically, and Laramie's a small place, right? But you can get anything you want to get if you're If you like tech, you go to the Boeing Museum. If you like, the
Right.
Museum of Flight or, whatever. And so without question, our art here is pretty interesting. And I could imagine that being
Yeah.
a worthwhile endeavor to create. I guess I'm sort of suggesting where the funds might come from, but I can't speak for the tourism
Yeah.
board.
No, that's a really great idea. And that's something I can talk to Visit Laramie about that. And I think that would be excellent for us to have. And for-
Somebody has to get paid to do that work.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
it costs money, and that could be the way to do it. And it could be super, super cool.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So no, thanks for the suggestion. We'll look into that.
Well, and as a matter of fact, if you want to look into that with me, I'd be happy to do that because I'm
Yeah.
on liaison with it. I'm
Cool.
to the tourism board.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, yay art is what I gotta say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so fun.
Yeah, thank you guys for doing that work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Item 10, present for approval the annual compensation agreement between the University of Wyoming and the Commissioners of Albany County in the amount of $21,912 from July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. The purpose of the agreement is to cover extension programs, therefore having an extension professional to assist and encourage the development of 4-H youth development programming. Mary Louise, are you with us? I don't see her on the big board.
I don't see her on the big board either.
Yeah.
So, however, I have reviewed this. So
Okay.
what this is that we do the annual agreement where UW pays part of Mary Louise's salary and her benefits, and then the county pays the other part of it. So this is just the agreement for the county to pay the $21,912 for this now current fiscal year for Mary Louise's extension coordinator.
Commissioners, any questions? I'd entertain a motion for item 10 then.
I move that we approve item 10 as you so eloquently read off.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye, all those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 11, present for approval, transfer of retail liquor license from Home Base Properties LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge to Waikolo Lodge LLC doing business as Waikolo Lodge. Kayla, good morning.
Morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I have a transfer of a retail liquor license, as you just mentioned. Jamie was here, but he did leave. This has been reviewed by the county attorney, the sheriff, and has been reviewed by the Liquor Commission with no concerns. They are closing on the property, I believe, on July 16th, so it'll be contingent upon the sale of the property.
Commissioners, any questions? I'd entertain a motion for item 11, please.
I move that we approve item 11 as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
It's funny, Jamie owns an industrial supply company in Cheyenne, and I've bought a lot of stuff in that place over the years because it's just what I buy. And he's good at business. He's good at what he does. He'll be just fine.
Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, all those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 12, present for approval, application for a special malt beverage permit for Lynn Montoya for an outside concert at the Vista de la Luna Bed and Breakfast, 88 Monument Road on July 10, 2021 from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. Kayla.
Hello again. This is an application for a special malt beverage permit. And Montoya here, if anybody would like to ask him any questions. It has been approved by the county attorney and by the sheriff, but with no concerns.
If you bet.
If you have any questions, that's fine. This is the 5th year we've done live music out at Vista de la Luna. This is our outdoor one. We do house concerts also inside, as you probably know.
Yeah.
If you have any questions.
Who's playing, Paul?
It'll actually be Steve Frame and his wife, and Diane Frame, and Peter Queel will be also performing. So we got a mix between country and jazz for this one.
Nice.
We're calling it a pop-up concert this year.
Yeah.
Paul, has this been advertised much?
No, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
This really just came together in about 2 or 3 weeks here. So it hasn't been advertised. a whole lot.
And betting on the weather.
Yes, and if we do get weather, we will move it inside.
Okay.
We did have a situation 2 years ago. We had a band out of Fort Collins that was in, and that was the day we had all the tornado warnings that came out, and we had the hail hit 2 songs into our headliner. And we had to move everything inside quickly. So things do come up out.
Yeah. So do you have to cap it then, Paul, if it moves inside?
Well, we do the best we can. We normally, fortunately, when we did move it last year, we had about 150 people that we were, and we can move about 150 inside between the top level and the bottom level if we have to. But that's about our cap. It's about 150 people. And it gets to be kind of challenging too, because then you got to figure, you got to almost start to put chairs out that were outdoors. It's all festival seating.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we won't have to do that, but you never know up there. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy weather.
I'd entertain a motion for item 12, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the application for a special malt beverage permit for Lynn Montoya for an outside concert at Vista de la Luna Bed and Breakfast, 88 Monument Road on July 10th, 2021, from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thanks for the details, Paul. Appreciate it. 13, present for approval application for catering permit for Rodeo Ranch for a wedding ceremony and reception at Delancey Enterprises LLC, 28 Blazing Star Road, Tie Siding, Wyoming. Kayla, on August 21st, 2021, from 4 to 9 p.m. Kayla, please.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this is an application for a catering permit, and it's actually Delancey Enterprises LLC is a liquor license holder out of Platte County. So they were approved through Platte County to use their license in Albany County. They're family friends of the people that they're catering the wedding reception for. So they do have approval, it shows in your packet, from Platte County to use their license here. So this is just the standard catering permit. It has been approved by the attorney and through the sheriff. So.
Commissioners, any questions? I'd entertain a motion for item 13, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve item 13 as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 14, present for approval. Thanks, Kayla. Provider agreement for juvenile detention services between the Natrona County, Wyoming, acting by and through its Board of County Commissioners, together with the Natrona County Sheriff's Office, at Albany County, Wyoming, acting by and through its Board of County Commissioners, together with the Albany County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Applehans, good morning.
Good morning. This is an approval for juvenile detention services. In Albany County, we do not detain juveniles at our detention facility. So we don't have the infrastructure set up to do so. And so when we have those few instances where we do have to detain a juvenile for criminal purposes, we transfer them up to Natrona County. And so this is an agreement between us and Natrona County to do just that.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, Sheriff, how long is the detention usually for these juveniles?
It depends on the crime.
Okay.
So usually for when we utilize this service, it's a detention on a criminal charge. They're usually it's usually a pretty high criminal charge to where it's not a cite and release type of situation. So a lot of are being held until they're able to see the judge. Given that it's a juvenile situation, you usually try and speed up the process on getting that initial hearing done as quickly as possible. This is usually for major violent felonies. This is what we utilize the service for. All the other juvenile services or any other type of juvenile criminal incidents that we deal with is usually a cite and release or a referral to some other type of center, whether that be youth crisis, Department of Family Services, anything else that we actually have in the county that isn't at Albany County Detention Center. So
On an average, What are the numbers? What are we talking about here?
Maybe 1 or 2 a year.
That's it? Oh, okay.
So single digits.
Good for that. Any other questions, concerns?
Just means some more of the programs are working, huh? Another-
Yes, our programs work. And then I also have a very strict policy that we do not detain juveniles at the Albany County Detention Center unless the circumstance rises to it. And there's very few and far between.
Good.
Entertain a motion for item 14, please.
I move that we approve item 14 as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, maybe it won't ever get used for the whole year.
That'd be
That's
great.
That's
Yeah.
what we're always- that's what we're always open.
Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. 15, consider 4 appointments, Sagan Wheeler and Derek Campbell, and reappoint Lauren Richards to the Community Service Block Grant Tripartite Board for the business sector for a 3-year term effective July 6, 2021. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Sadly, we're going to be saying goodbye to Beth Young and Jody Campbell on our board. They're going to leave us, but sounds like we got some good replacements. We have Sagan Wheeler, who's at Ivinson Medical Center or Hospital, and then Derek Campbell, which is actually the son of Dodie and a CPA locally here in town. And then we also get to keep Lauren because he's fabulous. So we're looking forward to working with our new people.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Entertain a motion for item 15.
I move that we approve item 15 as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank
Tracy,
you.
thank you. And you can pass along our thanks to Dodie and Beth.
Will do.
For I appreciate the work that they do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Did mom force that, Tracy? Did mom force that on to Derek?
Got voluntold.
Derek's really smart. It's
Yeah.
probably, as you grow up, I mean, he's in his 20s, mid-20s maybe. but-
Nah, he's 29. He's Addie's age.
Is he really that old? smokes.
We're all good.
Anyway, at some point, you have to join the process,
Yeah. Item 16, present for consideration the Inventive Wireless LLC doing business as Vista Beam, Hornsby Road Tower Permit Application LUCT-04-20. Joe, good morning. The floor is yours,
Morning,
please.
Chairman and Commissioners. The applicant is Inventive Wireless, doing business as Vistabeam. Look, the location of the tower will be in the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 20, Township 15 North, Range 74 West. Request is for a tower permit. Current zoning is agricultural, current use is residential, and access is off of Hornsby Road. There were 5 reviews. There are no existing concerns. Notice has been provided by posted sign, publication, and certified mailing as required. The findings necessary for approval. The proposed tower shall not adversely affect the public interest. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey, and the applicant has addressed all potential impacts. The applicant is proposing a 127-foot tower for a communication company. The tower will meet the setbacks for both property lines and lease lines. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval as listed in this report are incorporated herein as findings of fact. Property is currently zoned agricultural. Applicant has provided a complete application. The applicant has submitted a statement allowing Albany County to install a communications antenna on the tower if needed. The applicant has submitted a letter of intent to remove the tower if abandoned. Documentation has been provided that ensures that density standard levels are not exceeded. The application has provided a copy of the construction plan certified by an engineer licensed in Wyoming. And the foundation design must be submitted and approved by county engineer prior to construction. Conclusions of law, the provisions of the Albany County Zoning Resolution, Chapter 5, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 9 have been met. Our staff analysis, the applicant has provided a complete application and has addressed all potential impacts in Albany County standards for tower permitting. The applicant will need to follow all further Albany County construction requirements as they proceed. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation is to approve the Vista Beam Hornsby Road Tower Permit Application LUCT 0420 based upon and incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of law as stated in the staff report.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioners, any questions? And entertain a motion for item 16 then.
I move that we approve Inventive Wireless LLC DBA doing business as Vista Beam Hornsby Road Tower Permit Application LUCT 0420 incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Joe. Looks like we have you here again for the next one. Present for consideration renewal of the 2021 mobile home park licenses for County Meadows Estates, Lunatic Place, Coronado Mobile Home Park, Laramie Mobile Home Park, Peterson's Mobile Home Park, 60 Last Mobile Home Park, and Flying X Ranch.
Yeah, so we did all the inspections and these are the ones that currently have completed applications. So we recommend these for license renewal.
Commissioners, any questions?
And I'm new, Joe. So is this the time of year that these normally come up?
Yep, so we did the looked at all the parks and stuff in May and June. And then they're supposed to get their applications in by this meeting. So
And how often do these have to be
yearly.
applied? Yearly. Okay.
Joe, could you give me just a little bit of background about the inspections that you guys do in a mobile home park?
Yeah, and Dave can help too, but
That'd be
we
great.
just drive out there and make sure skirting and everything looks fine. It's all kept up. And if it's not, then we send them letters to clean it up, or we meet with them and tell them what needs to be done. And then they do it and submit an application with, if they need water results, they get those tested. Or if they're on city, then they don't need to be tested for the water. But yeah, so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Hearing and seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for 17, please.
I move that we approve item 17 as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 18, present for consideration amendments to the Albany County zoning resolution requiring special standards for development of property within the dedication plat of Centennial. David, good morning. Floor is yours. Thanks.
Morning, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So these are the amendments to the zoning requirements for site plans for the Centennial area. Everything that will be within the dedication plat of the Centennial will be required to have an engineered site plan or surveyor complete that. This came about as we've discussed right of ways and building in right of ways and on wrong people's properties. And so going forward, this requirement will help to alleviate some of the buildings that have ended up in the middle of the roads. So yeah, we put this together. We drafted this, the county attorney's office and the planning office. It's been out for review. I didn't receive any comments. I'm not sure if you guys did. I mean, I haven't seen anything forwarded on to me, but I've not heard anything from the public on this. So
Commissioners, any questions?
And how long was that for review, Dave?
How long? It's been over 45 days.
It has been. Okay.
Any other questions? I entertain a motion for item 18 then.
I move that we approve the amendments to the Albany County zoning resolution requiring special standards for development of property within the dedication plat with Centennial.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I guess my comment is, this is sort of a restatement of what already is, right? People have to build on their own property. And what's funny is when you make a rule, it doesn't necessarily make people follow it, right? The rule existed before. I actually think that this doesn't happen very much now. A lot of the issues that we're cleaning up are, you know, decades old, right? So I'm not inclined to support it just because it doesn't do anything that isn't already done. It adds expense to a process for a landowner and sort of bureaucracy, but it doesn't. It makes us feel good to make new rules. We could put up more speed limit signs, but people still drive how fast they drive. We should just have a policy that if anybody henceforth builds off their property, that we just run a road and bridge bulldozer through it.
Well, this is probably less costly.
You're not excited about that new rule, are you?
Not so much.
Well, you illustrate absurdity with absurdity, right? I mean, if I built in the street, I wouldn't expect some special consideration given to me for my ignorance, right?
I agree.
So I don't think there needs to be a whole bunch of discussion about this. I'm just not going to vote for it because these things already exist.
They do generally already exist. This is something that David had put together based on prior conversations at a commission meeting, talking about the issues that have happened in Centennial, and because there are such extensive issues in Centennial. And even just recently, David's office received a permit application for somebody who wanted to expand an already existing property that's in the middle of the street. So
just to make clear that it is in the street.
Yeah, so I think it's just to make sure that before anybody builds on lots that don't have anything on them or expands current properties, they're getting actual surveys so they know where their property rights are.
And what did David say to the person who wanted to expand their building that was already in the street?
I believe a letter of denial.
Right.
Yeah.
So the process works.
It does. I
already, the existing process works. And actually, the new process doesn't fix any of the issues that we already have. Those are pre-existing. So
it does. It just makes
going forward, it puts everybody on notice with an extra burden.
Right.
And I just don't like the extra burden. Everybody's already on notice.
Well,
Or
Mr.
not.
Chair, I would say that, just because we denied that, they could go ahead and decide to build in the right of way. And then we would have to get a survey anyways to fight the cause, so that would be an expense the county would have to do. And I agree. There's not a whole lot of this going on. But this isn't this application. We had another application where they already had a building that was built in the right of way, wanted to do an addition, and we actually approved that one. But then we went back.
That was because the applicant, the described property that they submitted, they had a title for, and they were building on a piece of property other than the one they described in the application.
Right.
So they basically just did a switch. It didn't matter to them that their application described a piece of property that was somewhere else in town, in Centennial. So people like that, you can't stop. They're just crazy. I wouldn't build in anything on land I didn't own. It's pretty hard to deal with that. It's pretty important to make sure you own the land you're building on, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really have any sympathy for that ignorance. It wouldn't bother me to run a road and bridge bulldozer through it if we somehow missed catching it. in the application part.
You're just chomping the bit to get on one of those bulldozers.
No.
Yes.
No,
Not today, anyway. On Centennial.
I'm just not a micromanager. I mean, at some point, people have to take responsibility for their own actions, one way or another.
Well,
And there's all kinds of financial and legal responsibilities that happen when you screw up like that or don't do your diligence. And this amendment to the zoning resolution doesn't change any of those things. They existed before and they'll exist after. This just makes us feel better.
well, I disagree. I think that when you're in a hole, the first way to get out is to quit digging. And so people that may look at a survey when they want to build because the situation on the ground might not be accurate and they might just take it as it is accurate, that actually buildings are where they're supposed to be. And we know that in Centennial, there are quite a few buildings that have been there for some time that ain't quite where they're supposed to be. And so if somebody were to take a look and that might cause them to not do something silly or expensive or force you to drive a bulldozer through their building, then, well worth it. And then if we have to do a survey, if they go ahead and build onto a property in the middle of the roadway, well, I just assume they have that survey cost because it shouldn't be borne by the people of the Albany County if they're going to be building in right of ways and a property that isn't theirs. So I understand your perspective, Heber. I don't know that I feel good about adding another rule. But I do think that if a rule does challenge a person's willingness to do something that may or may not be legal, and they may or may not have intended it to be illegal, then so be it. And we might never have to revisit this again, right? And I hope we don't, because those things ain't fun. I don't really appreciate having to figure out if we should bulldoze a house or have a roadway. So that's not a useful discussion of this board. So,
Something interesting. If I had lots in Centennial, I could build on them without a survey. All I have to do is go find. They're so small, all I have to do is go find the corner pins and string a concrete guy, a masonry guy's string line across there and make sure I don't cross the line, or that I'm set back from the line some amount. It's really just about people not doing any diligence at all, just making assumptions. And I wouldn't do that on a 35-acre piece of property or a section, if me personally, if I was going to build something, I would have a design for my own satisfaction, right? So that I build something that's worth building. You can't make rules that make ignorance go away. It's not possible. All it does is punish the responsible people.
all right. Any other questions, sir? I entertain a motion for item 18.
I think you had it.
Do we have it?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you, David. 19, discuss amendment to the Aquifer Protection Overlay Zone. David, you're up again. Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm not going to go through the whole spiel here. So what we've done is we went through and I took what I gleaned from our meeting, the work session, and put those things into the regulations. And then Commissioner Ibarra looked over it. She added some information and also did some changing around of language. And so that's what we're looking at today. And so really what I would like to do is schedule something in the future to really go through this. Unless you'd like to go through all this today, that's fine as well. But I wanted to get it in front of you to have a chance to really review it and look at it. I will just address Ms. Gorin's comments. I do think it's important to plan first and then put into regulations. But I do understand what she's saying. We have been working on these for quite a while. And so there are probably certain things in here that I wouldn't recommend going forward with, but there are other things that they're within what the scope of the cap plan we have now is. And if we do a joint plan, that'll just mean we come back and do some of these things again. So while that's kind of my recommendation is wait for that plan, I get it, and that's up to you. So, it's your pleasure what we'd like to do with these today. So.
Yeah, Commissioners.
I'd actually like to go through it and then have David go off and in 2 weeks bring it back when we actually approve it with some of the changes. Going through your memorandum, which I did, page by page, there's a lot that I agree with you, David. And so I think it wouldn't be a laborious thing. We can, change back some of the stuff, and I'm happy to concede a lot of things with different wordage and all, but I don't feel like we need to set a work session for this. We don't have that many more items on the agenda, and I think it's something that we need to get through. We belabored this. I know you guys have been working on it forever. P&Z had it for 2 years and did nothing. And as far as the argument for doing the cap, updating the cap before this, I don't agree with that. I think this can be done and then looked at again if need be when we work with the city, and we are finally at a place where we're willing to work with the city.
Any thoughts, Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah, I have lots. I guess a question, well, I have a comment. I think that these changes that are drafted, as proposed, are substantial enough that that we would be remiss if we didn't, these aren't just clerical cleanups. These are true substantial changes to the zoning resolution. So I think that we need to, if we're going to go forward with it, we need to publish the draft and take comments for the required time period, and then vote on it after a public hearing. I will say that this is a discussion item, and if we go through it as Commissioner Ibarra said, what I'm saying doesn't preclude that at all. I just think at some point we could be in legal trouble if we don't publish them and take public comment.
Well, I'm not saying not to publish them. Of course we publish them, but right now this draft isn't ready to be published for public comment.
Right.
And so I'd like to get it into a draft that does so somewhat today, put it back on David to clean up the last little bit, bring it back to us in a couple of weeks, and then be ready to publish that piece.
Right.
I totally recognize that as a discussion and that we wouldn't be taking any action other than working on the draft.
And I had brought it up previously, and I just wanted to remind you, in my reading of the statute and the research that I've done, if you guys choose to make substantial comments, substantial changes from what was proposed from planning and zoning, once you have your draft finalized in the form you'd like it to be finalized, I believe it needs to go back to planning and zoning for their review to be certified to you guys. And then you guys can take it out to final publication.
I think that's inaccurate, isn't it?
Well, God, I need that in writing because it just is that for me, that process seems to be loopy, and it also seems to put planning and zoning in the hands of appointed officials and not to the county commission, which is slated to have planning and zoning under their duties as enumerated in statute. Now, that might be the case. Not every law makes a whole lot of sense sometimes. But I'd like to say that my thought goes to them, to planning and zoning. We get their best take on it, goes out to public comment, comes to us after it's certified. we make our take on it, goes to public comment, and then we're done because we're end up being the people who make policy. If, for instance, if we were to do the route you suggested, Jennifer, then if we made changes to a document that had sort of been certified to the planning and zoning, and then they refused to certify our document, how would that look as far as a veto power, man? You know, I mean, three of us were elected, right or wrong, by people. That planning and zoning commission was not elected by people. And that puts an appointed representative over the top of elected representatives. And that might be the case. It totally might be the case. But I gotta think that somebody needs to say that out loud in a piece of paper somewhere. Because, and I think the Attorney General needs to say that to us, because that doesn't feel right, nor do I believe that's how it's intended to be in the statute. And I would just like for us to be right if that's what we're going to do, because that doesn't feel right to me.
I agree. It's, when I was looking into it, it was complex and confusing. I'm happy to write up everything that I found and send that to the three of you in memo format. And then I can ask Perks to request a formal AG opinion regarding the issue. We had talked about that before, but that was right when we had that change. And it didn't get done. And I forgot to bring it back up to Kurt, which is on me. But I will ask him today about getting that done. But in the meantime, I can get you my memo with my research, just so you can see where it is that I'm coming from at this point. So you'll have that information as you guys move forward.
Yeah, and please don't take it as a personal attack on you. I suspect you know more about the statutes than I do. This one seems to be one of the few delineated jobs of a county commission. And so
I struggled with it also when I was doing the research, because it all is very convoluted, and there's your jobs and then the appointed planning and zoning commission and how that all works together. So this issue is certainly convoluted, and some direction from the Attorney General's would be helpful.
And Jennifer, to your knowledge, is there still a delay in, the lineup as far as things being addressed by the AG?
There is. The AG that we work with generally, I don't think he would handle this directly, but I can call and ask him if he knows about timeframe for turnaround, and I can let you know that as well.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jamie.
And I just have to agree with you too. I think my changes are not many or broad in this document. And then we could get a better draft coming back on the 20th.
So the simplified question, Mr. Chairman, is does the statute, so we know the statute doesn't allow planning and zoning to make policy without the commission.
Right.
I guess the question is, can the commission make zoning policy without the planning commission?
Well, we got their certified document.
Right.
From there, we can work on it.
Well, I mean, I was just trying to sum up what I think the question is, right?
Yeah, it just seems like.
I think that if we change what they certified enough, then we don't have the same document. But that's a different discussion. I mean, to me, I'm just, for the AG, the question is, are we, the Planning and Zoning Commission can't make policy without the commissioners. The question is, can the commissioners make it without planning and zoning, or what does that look like? To me, I think that planning and zoning, that's like a work session over there and a forum for a work session where they basically they merge the policy. It's a legal vetting of sorts. So the policy mandate can come from the commissioners. They just have to draft it up with the planner so that we aren't in legal trouble when it comes back to us, right? They're doing work for us that that we can't do because we have so many other things that we do. But sometimes we deny things that they recommend approval of, and sometimes we approve things that they don't recommend approval of. So sending it back doesn't mean that they can hold it indefinitely or something like that, right?
And my concern in that statutory language is I can't remember what statute was written, but it says that the recommendation is certified by planning and zoning to the Board of County Commissioners for approval or denial. And it's silent with regard to modification of what's been certified. So then when it's silent is where you get into that. It doesn't specifically say you have the authority. So generally that means you don't have the authority, not just for this, but in all things. So that's where I've been struggling with how to reconcile that all together with the other powers granted to the commissioners in other statutes.
Yeah, I understand that this can be confusing. And it would be nice to be cleaned up once and for all, because I can't imagine we're the only county that would have this concern. And I just can't enter the endless feedback loop of certify, make our changes, public comment in both sides, go back to certification, public comment. Good Lord, that just sounds like you never get anything done. So David, we're back with you.
Okay.
All
So
right.
are we going through this then?
Yes, I think so.
Can I make one request?
Sure.
I will be out on the 20th.
Okay.
It was all right if we brought it back on the first meeting in August.
And when?
The first meeting in August.
Oh, yeah.
You're all right with that? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if not, I can
No,
get Joe to bring it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah, let's get Joe up here. Let's get that guy up here. Yeah, give him something. Yeah.
And plus, I think I might need a little bit of time just to get it all. I mean, if there's not many changes, it'll be pretty easy. But
okay.
But if August,
All right, so we'll start with you, and then after you're done, let's go to Heber, and then I'll finish whatever you guys haven't done that if I have a concern with.
Okay. Do you want to go piece to piece, or you just want me to give all my changes? Because
How would you like to do it, David?
I
What
thought
would
it
make the most sense?
Commenting on David's comments or his.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we just, go one by one and you guys tell me what to do with each of those, I think that would be great.
Okay, so we'll go through your comments
Yep.
on the document. Okay.
Yep.
So the first one is page 1, propose add for purpose paragraph wordsmithing and format changes. Anybody have, doesn't seem like there's any concern there. I don't have anything on page 1, Heber, anything? All right, page 2, proposed change. Staff added a sentence describing the inaccuracies of the western boundary as was discussed during the work session. This was subsequently deleted. A sentence was removed and a new sentence added that describes the incorporation of the technical advisory subcommittee's recommendation for defining the aquifer protection overlay zone. And then David, your comment was the commissioners had asked the language concerning the western boundaries inaccuracy be included, which were in staff's original draft. If such inaccuracies do exist, I would suggest citing the reports if this language is included. Staff could include the references it provided. Staff's proposed language without the references. APAW's western boundary inaccuracies. As further studies and research has been done near the delineated western boundaries, areas have been identified that more or less Tatanka shale than the 75 feet of vertical thickness determined to be appropriate for aquifer protection. There are well logs, I know, north that are inside or outside, inside the APAW's overlay zone that have less than 75 feet, and outside the overlay zone that have less than 75 feet width. So we know that the well log, there's not maybe a report, but there's a well log report. And I know that exists. I've seen it.
What's
I guess
interesting
what I
about,
would say,
what's interesting about the well logs is, in modern GIS, let's see. So let's say, how do I explain this? At the state engineer's office, they only narrow it down so far. So within a few lots, if you looked at the address and it's this, it could be the same address for 3 different wells. In other words, the old process for describing where a well is maybe doesn't even narrow it down to a lot. You know, so when you look at well logs, you don't have that good of resolution because, you know, now we have modern GIS and satellite imagery. So now we could drop a pin where the well is, you know, within 18 inches or something, a couple of feet, which is way different than some intersection of lines where the few properties around it, that's the physical description of where the well is. So we have so the well logs are accurate, right? If the driller did them right, but the location isn't. Does that make sense? Because nobody's ever gone back through the well logs and updated them with like GPS down to the gnat's rear end, right? So.
Well, we have never surveyed the line on the western boundary, so we don't know where it exists. It's just this line on a map, right? But technically, we don't know where that line is. It's never been surveyed. And so that causes you some problems, right? Because it could be, that line could be 500 feet wide, right? Who knows, right? What it is.
Yeah, probably if you zoom in on a map, it could be a strip of paint that's 50 feet wide. Yeah. And are you going to use the near side or the far side?
Okay. So we don't have a legal definition of that line. It's not really practical because it doesn't follow any surveyed lines. So for instance, we had one that came through that has this imaginary line going through their property, which may or may not be there, right? But we don't know because it's not legally defined. And so the city has used, and David, you submitted a map on 623 that defined that line along property boundaries as best she could. So not only does that define the line, the work's already been done, and it pragmatically now says to people, either your property's in or your property's out. If your property's in and you don't believe it should be, there is a process to get it out. That seems to be pretty straightforward and a really useful tool because now you know the line. And now people have certainty with their properties.
I like that map you created, David. It's a beautiful map.
Well, it's using the city's data.
Yeah. My only comment here is, one, I feel it's inappropriate in our regulations to, in our findings, have inaccuracies about the APAWS western boundary. I think it'd be more appropriate to properly define our western boundary and in layman's terms, so everybody understands it. My take on this particular section 3, it's merely explaining how the APAWS came to be defined and the basis of a decision made by a group of experts and all. I think you leave it as you had it in the clean version, David, and instead define that boundary under section 5A where we have APAWS established. That just makes more sense to me instead of trying to insert, well, this is inaccurate right here. Regulations shouldn't be pointing out under findings and inaccuracies. So I think how we cleaned it up in the non-red line version, in your clean version you gave us, is fine. And if we need to define the inaccuracies, and I'll then define it under where we actually define the APAWS being established. And that's section 5A.
Yeah, and then reference the map or the.
Yeah, you can reference to the map.
Okay.
So we would define the accuracies. We would impose the inaccuracies by definition, not by science.
But I'm not sure what you're.
Yeah, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, if we define where the western boundary is, then we're imposing something that's not accurate.
Well, you treat cancer the best you can, and every year it gets a little bit better. And so this doesn't say this will be the end of this document. I think these are living documents and you do the best you can, just like they did in the 90s when they set that boundary the first time. I mean, they did the best they could. We just have better tools now. And we have a 20 some years to think about it, which I don't know, it's helpful. It's been helpful in my life to feel a little more time to think about stuff. But I would agree with Sue on this. And then
So
I
we
think
won't put that in there.
yeah, put the regular stuff that you had and then reference the map for discussions of the line if that needs to come here.
Where we've already, under 5A, where you're establishing the aquifer protection overlay zone. It just means, it makes more sense to, just as a cleaner document, David, is all I'm saying.
I don't know, you know, there are proposed changes and then staff comments, and even back to the first item we discussed, I don't know if we decided to include David's comments or not. Does that make sense?
The comment that you didn't have any comment, or this on page 1, the staff comments, none? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, there's staff comments like relating to best available technology, right? So I'm not sure what we agreed to, the original language proposed changes or to incorporate the staff comments.
Yeah, we're just on the first one, the proposed change on page 2 findings, and then we'll go to the next proposed change, best available technology. We haven't been there yet. At least I don't feel like we've been there yet.
Okay, so if we're talking about page 2,
right?
What are we going to? I don't understand how we decide what our direction is to David. Because staff comment is comment, but it's not draft. Does that make sense?
Right. So if you have a trouble, I think, with David's or support of David's comment, then just voice that and we'll go from there. I mean, he can insert.
I think, you know, what I was
You
proposing.
understand what I'm saying?
I do, Heber, and I think his comment can be incorporated in new language as we approach. I'm just suggesting, in order to keep this as clean as possible, let's not go into inaccuracies here, but define the APAWS under the heading that is APAWS development. And then we can incorporate some of David's actual wordage here if need be, or find another way to say basically what David wants to say.
Doesn't that definition belong in the cap?
It's in there. 75 feet of Settanka shale. That is the delineation of the APAWS, and it's in the cap. And it's referenced and it's signed by 20 some professional engineers and geologists and hydrologists.
Oh, I just meant the map. The map delineation.
Be in the cap.
Rather than in the rules, in the regulations.
David, your thought on that? I mean, eventually it'll be in the cap.
All right. So if we adopt.
It's a chicken and egg question.
A map without that being, I mean, the way it's defined in the cap is they do have the plate 1, which is the lines, which, as was pointed out, has never been delineated. It also gives the process of the delineation of the western boundary, which was basically they took the point where the Settanka shale met the Casper east of there and then did some geometry. But there's also, I think, a section in there that talks about site-specific changes or whatever. So if we do, I mean, I guess if we adopt the map following the survey lines, it's good. And it's like, well, now we know where the line is, which is huge. But it doesn't follow kind of the methodology that's outlined in the cap. You know, I would think that we would want to update that to reflect any changes in the regulations for sure, because that's where, but I believe that the language changes that were done during this process for the regulations, they outline, this is what we're looking at instead of the cap, so, our cap at least.
Yeah, well.
I mean, we defined how it is where it comes from in the regulation changes, but it's not consistent necessarily with what our cap says. If that makes sense.
As far as that the plates would not match up. So this map would not match up with that plate.
Right.
Right. Can't remember if there's language in there in the cap, and maybe you know it better than I do. I'm sure you do. That if new information becomes available, that the cap is to be adjusted and to be a living document.
It does have some information.
Yeah, so I think we could probably fit under that. And quite honestly, you know, the cap took 6 years the last time we did it. You know, and I think we need something different than 6 years. I think if we do this and do it well, come through the cap, which I really am supportive of, come back and the cap says, hey, your regulations need to make changes. Let's make those changes, right? These both things can move at the same time, in my mind. Okay, so best available technology is where we're at. Is Heber, you had some thought about that?
Oh, no, I was just using that as the example that I didn't know. I mean, so I'm assuming that if we like the change, it's going to be based on staff comment.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is that what?
Yeah, but actually, I think we don't need it. I think this actually can be totally struck out because I think this is already covered under Chapter 3, Section C for non-conforming use. And this is only going to actually happen in the context of repairing a non-conforming use. So I don't know if it's even necessary the way it is, or with your, I'm willing to just strike it all together because I think it's already covered under non-conforming lots, structures, and use, and therefore it's not needed. Now, is that not true?
I haven't really looked into non-conforming, but this was a new definition that was added.
Correct, and now I'm
So-
saying I'll concede that it doesn't even need to be
Yeah,
added.
it probably, I don't disagree, I guess. I don't think it needs to
Yeah, I
be.
don't disagree.
Okay, yay.
Yeah. So
There
let's
we go.
remove that.
Moving on. Page 3, proposed change of vulnerable feature. Wordsmithing of the vulnerable feature definition. You didn't have any comments for that, David?
No, I don't think there was anything really.
Anybody here on the Heber or Sue, any thoughts? Okay, moving to page 3 to 4. Proposed change, references to the county and city cap, remove language referring to the county approved Casper Aquifer Protection Plan and include language referring to the city Laramie Casper Aquifer Protection Plan, redefining the western boundary to follow the boundary adopted in the city of Laramie cap. Your comment was the adoption of this version of the western boundary is not consistent with the method of delineation that is adopted in the Albany County cap. You discussed that. I would recommend instead of including references to the cap adopted by the city of Laramie, the county update the Albany County cap and use that as a reference. A benefit of doing this will allow for an inclusive public engagement process. Our regulations would be easier to defend legally if they were based upon a plan adopted by the county. The redefining of the western boundary in the APOS is a major change to the regulations, and the process should be completed with care. Where the county and the city are discussing the possibility of a joint cap update, this would be the opportune time to consider such an important change and include the studies and information that may support the change. I have attached a map that defines the added areas to the APOS to illustrate the change. The change will impact an estimated 140 properties and include additional 2,544 acres of property in the APOS if approved. So didn't we have something in the last cap that said that our boundary needed to move 2,000 feet to the west, something like that? There was some
Also,
language.
when we did an update to the regulations a few years back, that was something that came up then, but that wasn't ever in the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan.
Yeah, so we know the boundary is not what it's supposed to be, right?
But this wouldn't follow the methodology to change it.
Right, and so I say we don't reference the city. I'm in totally agreement with you. I say reference the map that you produced on 6/23/2021.
Definitely. I think David raises a good point about tying our county regs to city documents. I don't think that's ever good, a good regulation. And also, yeah, I think I propose that all the county's caps definition of the APOS stay the same, and that we merely change 2 statements to utilize the work that David has done with this map. So I'm proposing that, you keep it as it is, David. prior to me asking you to remove it before, and that's why I'm conceding again, but I'm instead add a statement that says the western boundary, the APAS, is as indicated on the map, Aquifer Protection Overlay Zone western boundary that you created. I just don't want the word of expansion of on there. Just eliminate that, but it's the map you created, adopted by the Board of Commissioners on whatever date you decide to put. And that the copies of the CAP and that this APAS western boundary map shall be kept in the Albany County Planning Office.
Yep, I'm in agreement with that.
How many, do we have any idea how many new non-conforming uses will be created if or when we move the western boundary?
I haven't looked into that at this point.
Might be something useful for this commission to know.
Well, they'll be grandfathered in, right, David?
Yeah.
They'll be grandfathered, yeah.
That whole area is full of non-conforming leases, right? There were residential, and Sherman Hills has 3rd-acre lots.
And it doesn't
Valley View.
impact it, Heber, unless they're doing some shady work out of a garage.
Well, the point is that it changes the legal status of it.
How so?
Because right now it's not considered non-conforming. If we move the western boundary, then it's something that has been there for a long time could be considered non-conforming.
But it's grandfathered
And they
in.
would be grandfathered in.
Well, nobody thought that about tumbleweed. Whole reason we dropped that is because we didn't have any legal standing. And we have an activist group asking us to continue that even though we don't have any legal standing. So the grandfather has to mean something. If we're going to harass somebody when they've satisfied the legal standards. I mean, we went through that. Terry, Pete, and I, injunction isn't the right word, but
Moratorium.
We challenged them with a stay until we figured out whether our rules would affirm their pre-existing non-conforming use or whether they didn't meet that standard, in which case it wouldn't be allowed to continue in its current use, right? And the reason that we dropped that is because we didn't have, it's because from a legal perspective, we decided that they had the right to do what they were doing and the county didn't have the right to take away or to remove their grandfather. And the challenge that I have is that because it's so politically and ideologically charged, I don't want to make any more non-conforming uses where people can be harassed by activists when the legal definitions and rights are clear.
Yeah, I guess I don't know where to start with that one, but
you don't have to respond to it.
We have a legal definition of the APAS. It's 75 feet of Setanka shale. That is agreed on by everybody. That's in the CAP, that's in our CAP, that's in the city's CAP.
That's not what I was speaking to. I was speaking to activists' willingness to accept a pre-existing use that's non-conforming, right? So if we move the western boundary, I'm not arguing the 75 feet of Setanka shale. I'm saying what happens, the effect of moving the western boundary is that you create non-conforming uses. And then people who don't really understand the legal rights of a pre-existing non-conforming use can harass that landowner endlessly and try to use the commission to do the same where they don't have any legal standing, right, to do that. And that's not what this process is for, right? Not to harass your neighbor. That's not what we're here for. We're here to make rules and then follow them. So, like tumbleweed, They met the requirements to keep their pre-existing non-conforming use. But we still have a group of people who doesn't understand that or can't respect that. I mean, obviously, if they hadn't met that standard, they wouldn't be in business today. This commission wouldn't have taken an activist role to preserve a pre-existing non-conforming use that should have gone away. I would have been happy to do that because I follow the rules. I don't have it in against them or for them. I just follow the rules. So when it comes to tumbleweed, there are people whose moral authority is more important to them than following the rules. And then they can weaponize government, and that's not nice. I would rather make, I'm a man of restraint. I would rather make a mistake of omission than a mistake of commission. Because this is America, right? So I don't want to move the western boundary west, in part because it creates non-conforming uses that people may not respect because they don't agree with them or whatever. They could just go to their commissioners and say, be our mafia enforcer and blow these people
You're
up.
ignoring data that is available, publicly available.
No,
of
I'm not talking about data.
drilling.
I'm talking about what happens politically in our community. I'm not talking about data. For whatever reason, the two of you think I'm talking about 75 feet of Setanka shale. I'm not. I'm talking about what happens when people don't respect other people's property rights in the case that they might have a pre-existing non-conforming use. And if you move the boundary west and you create more of them, that creates more targets for activists who don't respect people's property rights.
We don't know where that boundary is, and that's comes back to.
But if we move it, that's.
How do we know when we're moving it?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you move it and you create non-conforming uses.
Where is it to move it from? Where is that line?
I don't know.
That's the problem.
Wherever
right?
it goes to, it would create non-conforming uses. If you're hell bent on moving it west,
well,
to I don't know, you could core drill and make a nice little dot to dot line or something to make it super accurate. But in the absence of that, I guess you could impose the inaccuracies in a more convenient way like the city has by just drawing it down parcel lines. That's not scientific either. But none of that is my point. You see, my point is what happens politically and to people's individual rights when you impose a new standard on them and create a grandfathered use in their case. Is this commission prepared to defend the grandfathered uses when the activists come asking us to beat up on people? Like in the case of tumbleweed, we did beat up on them. We vetted it all. And they had not lapsed in their use by the definition of the rules. So they were able to keep that use. If they had lapsed, they wouldn't have been able to keep it.
But I got to tell you, there was a regulation that you wanted tightened up with respect to that. So it was 24 months of non-continuous use. You proposed 12 months.
Right.
I agree with you.
That wouldn't have affected tumbleweed. It would only have affected the next one coming down.
Well, and that's what this will do. This won't affect the people that would be grandfathered in under this rule. At one point, there was no APAUSE there, right? And somehow there was an APAUSE inserted, right? And
right. So I understand and I agree with you. My point is this commission willing to defend people who now have a non-conforming use, whether they didn't before, when people come harassing them?
This commission is willing to defend what it's done. It's not here to be the arbiter of what.
But if we create a non-conforming use that pre-existed, then we have to defend the right of the person to maintain their non-conforming use within the rules, 24 continuous months or whatever I can't even remember if we changed it or not. Right. But so the point is, I mean, I can't say it any more ways.
Okay. Well,
Are we going to create non-conforming uses and then become an instrument of harassment to people who have never stopped using their non-conforming use that we created?
well, you can only do the best you can, and what people do with the best you can, you shouldn't worry too much about. You should just be as legally exacting as you can. When new information comes, you do what you need to do.
Well, legally exacting would be to defend the pre-existing use, the non-conforming use.
Well, a grandfather would be the way that is defended. I don't know any other way, right? We're not going to set up a charitable legal organization at this commission level to defend somebody. I mean, is that not what you're suggesting? Are you suggesting that we provide the legal?
No, this is about how commissioners act, whether we follow the law, the rules that we made, or we just make them up as we go.
Well, I
Okay.
think we've got a
Because the
grandfather.
problem is when you create non-conforming uses, even for a future commission, not us, is it up to their whims? You know, whether they defend the non-conforming use, or is that a legal definition that they have to defend the non-conforming use that they created? Because right now, people who are using their property, they aren't a non-conforming use. Even tumbleweed wasn't a non-conforming use until the government decided it was. So the inherent right to the property owner is to maintain their use unless they discontinue it for some period of time that's defined in law, then they can't start it up again, right? So do we, is this commission and future commissions, by creating a special category for those businesses that doesn't exist now? See, there's a notion in our community, and it's a liberal one, a socialist one, that property rights are subject to the common good and not to the rule of law. Now you can make the common good be codified in the rule of law, but you can't do it. It's not open or transparent to do it on the fly straight out of your brain. That there's a process defined in statute, right? So there's lots of, I'm going to say, liberal or socialist activists who don't respect the law because their moral authority is more important. And I've been sitting on this commission for 7 years, and they all come to us wanting us to be their mafia enforcer against their neighbor. Well, in an extra legal sense. And that's what I don't want to have happen if we create non-conforming uses.
We're making a rough draft. It'll go through the process. This commission, in my time here, has done things that it had to retract because it did not follow its law. And so, I mean, we're expecting people to be perfect. We should be perfect. And we have not been in my time here. So we're going to do the best we can. We'll get a draft, get it out to the public. They'll comment. And if they don't like what it ends up doing, they have an opportunity every other November to remove members of this commission, and they should exercise that right. And so whether they're liberal or whether they're Republican or whether they're whatever, right? Activists are activists, and this commission shouldn't do much too worried about that. They should just do the regulation, because if you don't do regulation in Southern Florida today, I'm wondering what those people's families in that building, when the regulation wasn't done on that property right that supposedly was supposed to be.
The regulation was already there. It was a failure of process.
Okay, so let's get the process. Here we go. APAWS, where were we? Page 4 or 5?
Page 4 or 5.
Yeah. Delete to reward most of the current process for exclusion from the APAWS. The amended process keeps the current standard of having at least 75 feet of Setanka shale. And your staff comment, David, was the process is modified but should result in the same end. And the process modified meaning, just so we can keep on some contextual piece here.
So it was just reworded so the current process that's in there, I think from the draft that the planning and zoning created, or maybe it's in there, it might actually exist currently, is to go through the process of doing the zoning change, basically. So you follow that process. I think what was included here just, first they take out planning and zoning, I believe, and then they just allow the process to happen with the Board of County Commissioners. And you provide the same information and evidence that was provided before, so.
Okay.
So that's it.
Any concerns, commissioners? Okay, page 6. Proposed change, remove APOS from APOS development. This changes the meaning of the term to the definition of development in chapter 2 of the zoning resolution. Staff comments, this does not impact the regulations from my review. However, I recommend amending the zone 1 prohibitions, including language that exempts work that is done on the municipal wells and the protection of them by the city of Laramie. Recommended change, development except that which is proposed by the city of Laramie for the protection and usage of the city of Laramie water wells is prohibited in zone 1 of the APOS. I totally support that. I think that's smart.
That's totally funny. The zone 1 is wellhead protection and it's defined tightly enough that it could prohibit development of or repair of the wells within the wellhead protection zone. It's comical. Anyway, I support that.
All right. Awesome. Page 10, proposed change, addition of minimum lot size. This change adopts a minimum lot size of 35 acres, allowing 1 dwelling per parcel. Staff comments. If approved, this will create non-conforming lots and uses. This proposed amendment is supported by the Albany County CAP in that large lot zoning is listed as a regulatory management strategy. Statutory subdivision exemptions will continue to allow landowners to create lots for family members that may be less than 35 acres and used for residential purposes. Wyoming Statute 18.5.201A states nothing in Wyoming Statute 18.5.201 through 18.5.208 shall be construed to allow any Board of County Commissioners through the establishment of minimum lot size requirements or otherwise to prevent residential or agriculture uses authorized for land divisions that are exempt from subdivision requirements pursuant to Wyoming State Statute 18.5.303A I.
I have a question. Is this based on some scientific information or is this just arbitrary policy based on what sounds good to us commissioners?
The 35 acres?
Yeah.
It's based on what you provided me and I provided you the language, so, or what the commission did. So.
But I mean, there's
And the
no,
CAP says it as well.
there's no reference to why we chose that or how we came up with that.
Well, what I would say is that in the CAP, it does recognize, residential uses as a source contaminant for this type of thing. And then if you have less density, then it just goes to, it has less of an opportunity by contamination.
But the point is that the density should be the allowed density. If it's a dwelling every 5 acres, every 10 acres, every 15, every 20, should be based on something scientific, not just arbitrarily decided to be 35 acres.
Yeah,
because we need to exercise restraint in the limitations we put on people's property, and we need to have a reason that we can back with science for why we do it.
Well, there was a study that presented that looked at 2, 5, and 35 acre development of the existing private property over the APOS that's existed. Under those regimes, of course, you can imagine 2 acres would produce many water wells.
Whose study was it?
I want to say Wank.
Yeah, it's length.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that Wank committed scientific malpractice because they didn't have a control and they only did one set of data. And when we took that 205J grant, we promised the DEQ that we would not base policy on one set of data points. For something to be scientific, you have to be able to reproduce it.
David,
so we might owe the grant money back to the state if we're going to decide to base density on one set of data points with no control, especially when they drilled right through the middle of the leach field and created a conveyance for leachate to the bottom of their hole at the outset of their of their study. That study is not credible. I mean, it could be part. That study was only to figure out the process and whether the process works, because the nitrates weren't in liquid form. They had to reconstitute them to get them to come into their lysimeter. So maybe they reconstituted it with too little water or too much. It's a dilution problem. There's all kinds of problems with that study. And anybody who does a groundwater monitoring or a groundwater modeling, nitrate modeling study off of that set of data points, we need to do that 7 more times before we know. And we need a control hole that's not under a septic system, so that we can see what background nitrates are in a place like that. So the point is, that's not a credible thing to base.
That's just one perspective, I mean.
No, that's science. That's science.
David, do you know what the number?
I don't know any scientist who draws a conclusion from not enough data points and no control.
Are you finished, Mr. Richardson? So David, do you know what the number one fouling of groundwater reason in the United States is? Do you know what it is?
The number one?
Yeah, fouls water in the United States.
I guess septic system.
Yep, it is. So do you think that this has probably been studied in other places? I'd imagine. And
yeah, there's been like studies done. The one thing that was unique about ours is just our arid climate. And they pointed that out.
But gravity works the same here, and there's whole books of water flow and water contamination and whole manuals that are produced under this. True. So this is not just one brand new study in some one new place, right? We've had I saw 5 pages of water studies that have been done in Albany County in Laramie since 1932, 5 pages. Now, I didn't look through all those studies, but I've seen some of those studies. So this is not brand new territory. So WANC is a data piece. The number one fouling of water wells of septic system, also another data piece. Then there's just the common sense of more stuff, tighter compacted means more impact, right? And the DEQ has that under their stuff also. So to suggest—
I don't disagree one bit.
Well, you do, because you're saying this is a crazy notion.
No, what we don't have is the proper loading study to define what the appropriate density standards should be. That 35 acres is arbitrary.
We got 2, 5, and 35 are our zoning options. And that's why 35 was chosen. And that it's talked in the cap. That's why I would support this, right? Because 5 is awful small. 2 is even smaller.
Well, the cap regulations treat the entire area the same. The vulnerable features, the way less vulnerable features. So if you have 71 feet of Setanka shale and you're way down at the west end, you get treated the same as you do if you're in the exposed recharge area way up the hill. So the point is, from a scientific perspective, down on the west end, the density that would be appropriate or allowable is different than it is the further east you go. The point of it is, none of this is based in science.
No, it all is. And in fact, I guess if you want to think of this in the old camping term, you never want to get your water down from where somebody's peeing in the water, right?
So cute.
It goes downhill.
That's
right?
cute.
And that happens
but
in
a lot of
aquifers.
the water studies that you describe are in alluvial stuff. Like you take Helena, Montana, there's been all kinds of discussion about the similarities, but there's no similarities.
So I talked about 5 pages of water studies in Albany County, in Laramie specific, since 1932.
And
There's
what
no
do they
Helena in there.
what do they conclude? What do they tell us about the aquifer? You don't know.
I'll go get you a manual and you can read the manual, because this is not brand new science, Heber. This is well known and well established science.
But what is being proposed here, goes beyond. So we know that the Casper Aquifer has a certain amount of vulnerability, and we know it does in different places on it, right? And
what would you propose then? So what would you propose? 35 acres is on here. What is your proposal?
I propose that we do the Wenck study 7 more times, so we know what a decent in different places, so we know what a decent density. So we have actual real data for it. I'm not inclined to make decisions out of fear. What I know is that the Casper Aquifer is very good at protecting itself. It's very good at it. Despite what everyone says, it's very good at it. There's a certain amount of protection that needs to happen there. But because of the climate of fear, even the professionals who are activists who speak on it have a confirmation bias. They overvalue, they don't consider all of the data equally. They overvalue things that support their hypothesis, and they undervalue things that contradict it. So we have a narrative in our community that says the Casper Aquifer needs to be protected. And I agree with that. The question is, how far do we go to protect it? And how do we make sure that the protections that we inflict on landowners isn't overkill, right? And fear and moral authority mean that there's no such thing as overkill, right? We're so sure of our moral authority to protect the water that we can broad brush wreck people's property rights because of what's at stake, except that's not appropriate. It's not scientifically appropriate, and it's not legally appropriate, and it's not good policy, right? So everybody thinks that I'm like Mr. Super Septic, but people build septics everywhere. If they don't build them on the aquifer, they're going to build them somewhere else, right? And that's the smallest part of my business. Sometimes people accuse me of having a conflict of interest. The thing that has frustrated me so much about the aquifer discussion is there's all kinds of nasty rock and not enough soil, and it's a pain in the ass to develop up there. It's expensive and nobody wants to do it. So when the city and the county are all focused on that, and we just did the Pilot Hill purchase, so we just took whatever, 5,000 acres off the table, right? That's good policy. We could do that again, maybe twice. It would be good. Because once it's in public hands, the public-private conflict doesn't exist anymore, and it can be used however the public officials decide it ought to be used. But we don't get that same luxury when it's somebody's private land. So we have to make sure that we understand that the activists have never quantified the risk. They overstate it and overinflate it. So we know there's vulnerability, and we think that it's up here. Or maybe it's down here, or maybe it's somewhere in between, but we don't have any relative sense or understanding of the vulnerabilities. We don't. And it's because people have been dishonest with us. So people think that I have an agenda, and I don't, one way or the other. I'm going to tell you, if I thought the aquifer was as vulnerable as everybody says it is, I'd be throwing down with you guys, regulating the hell out of it. But I don't, because I consider all the information equally.
Even that's just not true. You just labeled activists and liberals and agendas and confirmation bias.
Yes, I do.
You don't consider it equally.
I have considered all of those things.
Okay.
And that's how I got to the conclusion I did.
Okay.
Okay, but he was arguing that more septic systems will compromise eventually the overall system. You can't argue that. You be a septic man.
I'm a septic guy, and I can argue that.
Okay.
It's a question of density.
Our job is
it's a question of allowed
protect
density.
the health of this community. And if that means I have
you know what? That is not our job in this sense. The state engineer doesn't regulate these things because the state engineer isn't all that concerned. And the DEQ doesn't because the DEQ isn't all that concerned.
No, that's not their charge. Their charge is to understand the septic system in its place. They do not evaluate the septic system in aggregate of all the other septic systems. That's not
But the
true.
state engineer does when it relates to the development of that water. The protection of the water is the state engineer's job, not ours. And the reason the state doesn't take action is because they don't see the same vulnerability in the aquifer that the activists do.
Okay, well, I support the 35. Do you support the 35?
I do as well. And David, I'm not really sure what you're saying here, where you say the APOS already is full of non-conforming lots. But when you say this may cause non-conforming uses, how?
So if you have a dwelling that's less than 35 acres, that's a non-conforming use. I'm just noting that. I mean, I'm not arguing at all. I'm just stating the fact.
Okay,
here
well,
that
it shouldn't cause any non-conforming uses because otherwise.
It's just saying that these things will be grandfathered.
Right.
Correct.
So,
basically, what it would do is it would say the standard is 35 acres. So every single piece of development in the IPOS that's under 35 acres is non-conforming. So if my house burns down, am I allowed to rebuild it? Because my lot is smaller than.
Follow the process, and the answer is yes.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, so I think the reason I put that it will cause the non-conforming uses is because there are properties out there that have more than one dwelling on a property right now.
Right.
And so that will be the use that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Well, and on the western boundary, there are businesses. A vet clinic. I don't know if that nursery is still running as a nursery.
That's on the western boundary. Those are inside the western boundary. The western boundary goes beyond them. Yeah.
Right.
So they're already there. They're already in the APOS zone, both of those two building businesses. So, all right, let's move on here. Page 11, proposed change, shallow depth to groundwater language. Shallow depth to groundwater is already defined in the vulnerable feature definition. David, your staff comments were none.
I agree too.
Okay. Proposed change setback variance. The ability for the county wastewater engineer to allow a lesser setback from vulnerable features for wastewater systems was removed. Staff comment. While I do not believe this has ever been an issue, this standard may create unusable properties, allowing the county wastewater engineer to reduce the setback based on sound engineering solutions, such as installation of an enhanced wastewater system would potentially be a solution that can balance protection of the aquifer and the development of a property.
So there may be properties like in the Sherman Hill area where there's smaller lots and maybe they are close to a drainage or something if they didn't have 100 feet, so we went up there and they wanted to do something, they didn't have that 100 feet, then they just would be able to use their property. I don't know if that's the case. I was just.
Can that be handled through a variance request, David?
Well, that's what we had in there, but we've removed that variance opportunity. I mean, I guess technically they could go through the variance process that we have in the overall zoning to do that.
As a septic guy, I can tell you the variance should stay there because there's every kind of septic. I mean, depending on how much money you want to spend or how we think that wastewater treatment systems only look like one thing, but there's every kind. So the question is, which kind is appropriate for that particular site? Because you can treat water where it can just be discharged on the surface. They do it all the time in the oil patch. They have a little sea container, a little baby one, and all that stuff can be put in the ground. That is a water treatment plant, and the water coming out of it is treated to a standard where they can run it through a sprinkler out on the ground. The point is that if we impose what we think is a definition of a septic, then we would have to remove the variance because you need that setback from a vulnerable feature. The fact of the matter is you can put in a septic you can go as fancy as you want. You can put in a wastewater treatment system that you could recycle the water and use it again for drinking, and people do. So the variance needs to stay in there so that somebody isn't prohibited from using their property based on that distance. Maybe they need to be required to do something that treats the water more, but.
Yeah, so I guess this puts a lot on the county's wastewater engineer. So if we could help define what that something more is that Heber's suggesting, that might be helpful, right? You know, and I don't know how to do that. I'm hopeful that you do.
Okay.
Well, and isn't, I met Barney, isn't he more of a septic system guy and not an expert on aquifer contamination? So
He's a wastewater engineer. He knows everything about wastewater treatment. He doesn't have to know about the aquifer. All he has to know about is wastewater treatment.
Yeah, so give us something that would allow somebody to be vulnerable, but that protects, right? You don't just want to put
We
it.
just need to keep the variance so that if somebody comes in, they could bring their solution.
Right.
And the wastewater engineer could decide if that solution treats it well enough. I mean, if you treat it to drinking water standards, you can sure put it on the aquifer. You know what I mean? The point is then we're not by definition saying you can't meet that distance and there's no opportunity for the variance. But the landowner would have to come with the solution that would satisfy the wastewater engineer if they're gonna propose something shorter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'll get public comment and somebody will steer us in the right direction, that I'm certain. Page 11 to 14, wordsmithing and a few additions and deletions throughout the section. Staff comments, most of the changes seem to be cleaning up the language, better defining the review process for an SSI review. Has been a work in process since the review began. So that doesn't seem to be any bone of contention there. Page 14 through 17. Proposed change, APOS development permit. The whole section is in addition to the current APOS regulation requiring a separate permit for the development of the APOS. Staff comment, I have concerns, questions with how we will deal with zoning certificate approvals. Zoning certificates are currently approved by the planning department and do not go to the board for approval. The zoning certificate is to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Additional language is needed to clarify the process. Also, the way it was written, I don't know if the APOS development permit is supposed to be approved before zoning certificate, subdivision permit, et cetera, or if it can go through the process concurrently. The way it is written suggests an applicant goes through the approval process and is issued an APOS developer permit, then includes a permit with the other application, goes back to the board for the approval. I would suggest rewording this to allow the permits to go through the process concurrently. I have a suggestion, let's get rid of this because I can't remember who inserted this. And it makes very little sense to me previous to this permit. Just keep that language somewhere and add that language, right? I don't know.
as far as the site-specific investigations, all this, I'm the one who made the changes and I would like to address this. First
You
of
did
all,
the permit? You inserted the permit?
no.
No, that was, I think, Peggy. I think that was
Right,
County
no.
Attorney Trent and David who had this idea,
Correct.
or maybe not you,
And
David, I
actually,
don't know.
David, you're right. I was looking at something else. There are no current permit regs in our regulations, David. I looked at that. There isn't anything, any kind of permit regs in our current regulations. Nothing in the current regs requires a separate permit for development in the APOS. And you can look at page 316. I looked at that. Okay. The APOS development permit was created in the various drafts over the last 2 years. And I'm assuming that it was you and Peggy doing that. And I'm really not sure how to respond to your comment here because there are no current permit regs in our regulations. As far as the clean version that we put here, it says, and shall accompany. So under 10A there, David, APOS development permit process, an application shall be made on a form provided by the Albany County Planning Director and shall accompany the application for zoning certificate, subdivision permit, condition or zoning change. If we need to add wordage to say, and shall be considered all at once, I'm okay with that, but it's not saying one is applied for first, then comes to us, next one is applied, then comes to, it shall accompany all of those, and they can all be considered at what time if they're required. If we want to put that last wordage.
Do you like the permit being created? That was my comment. I didn't know how this thing got in there, and I don't remember the discussion of it needing to be in there.
I would like the zoning certificate part taken out. Zoning combined with the list of prohibited uses is enough. You know, I mean, if we ever want to pull a zoning certificate off the consent agenda and hash it around in here, we can. Because those aren't in effect until we approve them on the consent agenda. So if something came up and we wanted to deal with it, we could. But to me, it's too much micromanagement when you already have the list of prohibited uses. You know, if somebody's going to build a house, they're going to build a house. I don't want to have to consider that among all the other things that I consider. And if they're going to do something that's on the list of prohibited uses, they can't. So I don't see the point of having zoning certificates in there like they're described.
Yeah, David, you had
Yeah,
a thought
so,
on this.
so Mr. Chairman, so this did come about when, this is one of the things that Peggy had identified as needed to be included with the whole tumbleweed thing. However, I would say I agree with you. I would be happy to remove this whole section. What the city does, and which has worked really well from them, from what just my comment or my talking with staff is they include the site-specific investigation with the permits that go through the process, right? So subdivision permit comes in. As part of that subdivision permit, they have to prepare a site-specific investigation, and that goes with the application to, you know, city council. And in this situation, it would be to you guys, obviously. I guess the one question, what I was trying to bring up in this is like, so if someone is required to do a site-specific investigation or this development permit, or however we go about doing this, do you want, you know, there will be circumstances where the zoning certificate may need to come to you, but they don't right now. Right now, we approve that in-house. So do you want that process to include you in it, or do we just take the site-specific investigation, make sure that what they're doing is looking good and the peer review's done and everything, and everybody's happy to approve it? Or is this a situation where zoning certificates in this situation come to you? That wasn't really defined super well that I thought, but so yeah, so we've got a couple of different discussions going on here.
So my answer to you is, if we could mirror something that the city does, right? I think certainty is a really useful thing. So whether somebody's developing in the city or the county, that they can expect similar things if they make sense, right? So that's my personal opinion on that. The permit, I never really understood that whole piece, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. It just means I never really understood it. So that's my 2 cents on that whole discussion.
I mean, the basic premise with the permit is just a little more, I don't know, kind of outlines what you have to do, but it's not changing anything really.
Yeah.
It's just saying, well, now you got this permit that you filled out, and you know, it's the process would be similar if we just bring the site-specific investigations with those other permits.
Yeah, I'd like to see the site-specific stuff. If that, I think we should see that. I think that's best practice. And so,
And the site-specific investigation stuff is specifically related to the wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so because I don't know, you can pour a foundation anywhere. It's inert. It's concrete. The issue truly is, you know, site-specific investigation to define vulnerable features so that you can implement the setbacks required in the wastewater section. So I can't see requiring a site-specific investigation for the actual building permit, Because if I owned a 35-acre lot and only 3 acres of it was buildable, because the rest was a big slab of rock, I gotta decide whether I think I can keep the setback from in other words, the wastewater system decides where the structure is gonna be built, not the other way around. Does that make sense? So I don't really see the point of the site-specific investigation being applied to the building permit when it's applied to the wastewater permit.
And I agree. The biggest thing is the new subdivisions, right? When we have a subdivision goes in, and honestly, if it's going to be 35 acres, it's going to be maybe a moot issue, but that's where we have not required, because of the way the regulations is written, site-specific investigations to come to us, even though some of the applicants have done it. We've never reviewed those. I mean, that's not really part of the process. I mean, we have the information, we pass that on. But that's where the big thing is we really needed to require that site-specific investigation there.
You mean in the subdivision process?
Well, right, because once you have the subdivision and they do that site-specific investigation, all of the features, the vulnerable features are outlined. They'll know what setbacks they'll need to do. They'll know where houses can be built and septics can be built and where they shouldn't develop. But then there's also
you can't draw the subdivision without a site-specific investigation. Otherwise, you just drawing lines on a map, you might create unbuildable lots because of vulnerable features. So
it makes a lot of sense there.
What developers do is they do the site-specific diligence so that they can make a buildable subdivision. They're just not required to share that with us, but they do, right? So then I guess we can see that if they share it with us, we can see that the lot lines are drawn, I mean, if I had a subdivision, I'd draw the lot line right down the vulnerable feature because that helps with the setback from the vulnerable feature. The vulnerable feature goes right through the middle of the lot. You might not be able to meet the lot line setback and the vulnerable feature setback, and then you have a worthless lot, right? So I don't know. I think we're still back at zoning certificates, and once a subdivision is established with the vulnerable features accounted for in it, and because we have that dealt with in the wastewater regulations, I don't think we need to have it here. Because it's not the structure that's the issue. It's the distance, the setback, or the distance between the well and the septic and property lines and vulnerable features. So,
well, I guess for me, David, a whole list of zoning certificates without them being delineated makes it very difficult to do the research. And so I think it is different being in the APOS and being outside of the APOS. And so I would like to be aware of when that happens. So it seems like the city has a process that makes people in these positions aware of it. If there's a different way of making them aware, because I think you have a different level of concern. I have a different level of concern if somebody is 35 miles outside of town, right, on the aquifer protection overlay zone, than if they're right next to the city wellhead. And so whatever their process is, whatever makes sense, I would like to know that those are not just lumped in with the zoning certificates. And so then I have to research every zoning certificate because these packets are hundreds and thousands of pages long, and I just don't have that time. It's perfectly honest with you.
And honestly, I don't mind if you want me to pull that out and bring them to you specifically for your approval. I mean, we just have to write that in. That's you guys' choice.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. All right, moving on. 18, do you have direction on that one? Because that was a big piece of the permit and there was a lot of ground covered.
The development permit, kind of redefining how we are dealing with zoning certificates. I think those are the big items.
Okay, super. Proposed change, wastewater design standards, mostly rewording and moving some of the wording within the current regulations. Staff comments, in addition to the regulations require specific Wyoming DEQ standards to be followed. I'm not sure exactly what regulations are being referred to. A citation would be helpful here. Some of the proposed standards regarding inspections and reporting of system failures may be difficult to enforce as other entities are relied upon to complete the inspections and the reports. So it's in the 23 and 25, title 23 and 25 of what the DEQ looks at as far as.
Yeah, I mean, it just didn't come up which ones you're talking about. 25 is the septic system standards, and 23 is what they have to do for subdivisions, basically.
Yeah, and there's one of them in there that is with viruses or something that nobody ever checks, right? So
Specifically, that's chapter 25, section 19. And I think too, David, you received a letter from the DEQ sometime last year that regarded enhanced septic systems.
Yeah, and basically, I actually called them on that one because I was kind of curious that what the letter said was it almost made it sound like you had to do enhanced systems in that area. But when I talked to them, they said, no, only if a subdivision goes through and meets that criteria for that site specifically, then they would require it. It wasn't something that we had to require for everything, which is kind of what it was kind of worded weird, but I did have a follow-up conversation with the gentleman who wrote it, so.
Our regulations are more strict than the DEQ standards. If we defer to them, we would be lowering our standards.
Well, the DEQ is willing to work with you on the inspection and types of installations and all.
Sure.
Right.
And so what standards are you referring to, either Heber? I'm not really certain about our standards being more restrictive than DEQ.
We just have extra things that have migrated in to our things like effluent filters and where line cleanouts are, maximum depth, that the system can be.
In your septic system regulations.
Yeah,
okay.
And whether you vent, there's a definition as to why, when and why and what depth you have to vent a leach field. Because the deeper you bury a leach field, they're anaerobic, but at some point there's not enough oxygen and they don't do as well, right? So that you vent them so that, and those things don't exist in the DEQ regs. We just have extra little things that make systems perform better and last longer than the DEQ rules do. And those are based on Barney's. He's been a wastewater system designer for 40 years or something. A long time. And he's done it in way more challenging soils and hydrology than this. So the point is that the DEQ standard is the minimum, but our regs are already written to be more stringent than the DEQ standard.
So, yeah. So our regs, meaning the septic pumper and septic inspection people, is that what you mean by our regs? Or?
No, I mean when you're to get a permit to construct a wastewater system, what's required to do that is, it's like a development code, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere they require GFIs or maybe somewhere they don't, right? It's like that. It's like all of the elements are there that meet DEQ's requirements and then some that relate to performance of the system and its longevity and how well it treats water. And so those things are venting of leach fields, effluent filters, even down to installing something that makes it so a kid can't fall down the septic riser and drown and die in the septic. You know, those things didn't used to exist and now they do. So for the installer or for somebody who's doing a repair, there's very practical and very good higher requirements, more stringent requirements, and they all have good reasons and they all do what they're supposed to do.
Would you be all right with DEQ or local regulations, whichever is more restrictive?
We should just refer to our own, because ours can't go outside DEQs, right?
Good.
That's the minimum standard. I mean, I don't know if we have to refer to DEQ when it's inherently, a county can't have wastewater treatment rules that are lower than the DEQ. It's not possible, you know.
Some might wonder if you wouldn't want to, but that's another discussion some days.
Well, the DEQ would intervene in that. And actually, some counties don't have any.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Some counties don't have any wastewater regulations.
Yeah.
It's the DEQ's, in the absence of specific regulations written by the county commissioners and their experts, you get the DEQ is the default.
Right.
So in Carbon County, they don't have a wastewater engineer and they don't have wastewater regs. So the county just doesn't manage that. You have to make the application to the state DEQ and go through Cheyenne. It's kind of like the health inspector. You know, you can take that over from the state, but you don't have to. I mean, we have, and then we've made it more stringent.
You have that?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. 19 through 21. Proposed change non-conforming uses. Expansion is prohibited. Repairs of damage have been limited. And the staff comments, if damage occurs through no fault of the property owner and a contaminant is released on the property, the regulations will not allow a repair of the use. This is something that should be discussed. Wyoming Statute 18.5207 states that zoning resolutions shall not prohibit the continuance of the use of any land, building or structure for the purpose of which the land, building, or structure is used at the time resolution is adopted. If there is not an alteration of the use, I would recommend the use be allowed to continue. But you shouldn't put the single wall tanks back in, right? So I'm not sure how to do this, but you should have best available control technology, I'm guessing, or something along those lines. Sue, you have a thought on this?
Well, I think this is actually already covered in other regs. I don't know if there's any place that we should make a special provision, it'd be over the APOS. So I'm not sure that we need to address this here. I think it's addressed under Section C of the current regs that provides general provisions for overall zoning regs treating all the non-conforming uses
I agree.
the same way. So I don't think we need to.
Okay. I'll look you there.
So I guess what are you saying? So,
well, I'm saying I disregard exactly what I talked to you about, and I'm with these guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just remove that.
Remove that.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Simpler is better in my world, David.
Me too.
Yeah. 25, proposed change, relationship to federal and state law, wordsmithing of this paragraph. Staff comments the word imposing is added, but not sure if it makes sense. So the staff comments and recommendation, when this process began, the intent was to clean up a few problems areas in the regulations based upon concerns brought up by the former county attorney. These amendments have since turned into a major overhaul of current regulations. Even though the amendments have seemed to take a long time to get through process, they have felt rushed since the process began. There continue to be talks of updating the cap, but the county is seriously considering an update to the cap. We may be going through this process backwards. An updated cap would be provided as a chance to really look at what the studies and reports bring to the aquifer protection table. Updating the plan will likely lead to additional information to base regulatory changes. The planning process will also provide more public comment, which has not necessarily been solicited up to this point in the process. The natural step after the adoption of a plan is to put them into effect via regulation. If we change the regulations now, we may be going through a similar process in the near future, assuming the county decides to participate in the joint update of the cap with the city of Laramie. It is my recommendation that we postpone the work on these regulations to have the updated cap approved.
So there's two different paragraphs there. That second one was just my overall, which we
Yep.
already talked about. We kind of moved past that. We're doing this.
Right.
But the other one was.
As far as the imposing, David, that's just totally, we failed to take out which make.
Yeah.
And so just eliminate those two words in section 14 and it fixes it up.
Yeah.
So you should just read state or local law imposing stricter requirements. Strike which make.
Yep, that's what that was. Yep, that's what I looked at yesterday. That's nice. Too. And then I think that is it. The one thing that I would say in the packet, there was no 19 through 21. The page red line down on my chapter here.
Right. The red line version, your clean version, David, had it, but the red line.
Okay. And so
That's
we
right,
have,
because I have it, but maybe I provided a different one.
yeah, so the one I download the one the public gets and it's not on the public on our agenda. So
right.
We just make sure that that was there the next time.
Yeah, we'll do my
Thank
best.
you.
So.
All right. Thank you, David. Sorry that was a process, but that's all they are. 20 has been moved off the agenda. Did I hear somebody say something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could I make a brief comment, please?
Sure, please, Sarah, go ahead.
Again, Sarah Gorin again with Albany County Clean Water Advocates. I just wanted to quickly address a couple of points that got a lot of discussion just for people who are listening on the live stream and all. On changing the boundary, it will bring in non-conforming lots, and which the APOZ is already full of non-conforming lots. It will bring in non-conforming uses in the sense that David spoke about, like where people might have an extra building or something, but I think it's quite unlikely to bring in prohibited uses, that is the use of hazardous materials in a business activity, which is what tumbleweed is. So there's a big distinction there that didn't get discussed. Also, there are two WANC studies. The first one is the one Commissioner Richardson referred to, which was the specific septic tank study, but there's a second study done for the city of Laramie, and I believe you've been provided with copies of both of these, which is the build-out study, where they used the same modeling that the Department of Environmental Quality uses to assess the impacts of septics, and they applied that to the aquifer to show what would happen at different lot size scenarios. So there is that information available to substantiate a lot size. Finally, I assume that Aqua is among the activists that have been referred to in this meeting, although we're certainly not the only ones. But I would ask for an atmosphere of respect for other people's opinions, not labeling other people and their opinions and constantly interrupting other speakers. I would ask for a civil discussion of differing viewpoints that we can all participate in. Thank you.
Sarah.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask Aqua for intellectual honesty. That's what I would ask them for.
Well, I think that just proves the point right there. So we'll try to be better at this commission, Ms. Gorin, and then we'll try to do less interrupting and more listening. That would be useful, I think, for life advice. 21, make appointment to the Albany County Public Library Board. Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we reappoint Kay Cowie to the library.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. 22, request a statement of the receipts and expenditures of the county during the preceding 12 months, setting forth the source and amount of all receipts and the purpose and the amount of all expenditures to be prepared upon reconciliation of all account by the county treasurer and the county clerk no later than September 30, 2021, pursuant to Wyoming statute 18-3-515. Jackie, we're adding more work to you.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, commissioners. This is a requirement under Wyoming statute that both the treasurer and the clerk provide to you a statement of receipts and expenditures of the activities from the preceding year. And so basically, I am asking under Wyoming statute that you, as the Board of County Commissioners, request that both the treasurer and I provide for you this statement of receipts and expenditures, and that we will have it presented to you before September 30th, 2021 for fiscal year that just ended, fiscal year 2020 through 2021.
Commissioners?
Is this just a normal process?
It is, and it's a statutory process that we
Okay.
have to do.
Okay.
I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we request a statement of the receipts and expenditures of the county during the preceding 12 months.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 23, present for approval revised election systems and software LLC hardware maintenance and software license maintenance and support service agreement between Election Systems and Software LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, ES&S, and Albany County, Wyoming for 5 years. Jackie.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, as you're aware, Election Systems and Software is the vendor that we use for our election equipment. A couple of meetings past, you approved the hardware and software license and maintenance agreement. There was a revision made through ES&S in conjunction in working with the county clerks and the Secretary of State to basically extend the contract for 5 years. Initially, the original contract that you approved was only for 4 years. And so this is an amended, an addendum to the original contract, basically extending it for a 5-year period instead of 4 years for your consideration and approval.
Commissioners, any questions? Entertain a motion for item 23 it is.
I move that we approve item 23 as presented by Jackie.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. 24, present for approval e-commerce proposal between Arca Search and Albany County for a one-time installation fee of $2,495 and an annual fee of $1,799 for access to land images in the land department. Jackie.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this is an exciting time for Albany County. In your approval process a few years ago, you allowed the Arca Search to basically digitize approximately 700,000 records in our land department dating back from 1865 through October of 1997. I'm happy to report that that project has just been completed, even though we budgeted in excess of, I believe, $200,000 in this fiscal year for the project to continue. This project will come in under budget by approximately $100,000.
Yay.
Wow.
And I'm happy to report that now, in order for us to get this data out to the public, that we have an e-commerce proposal for your consideration for approval. Basically, in order to enter into this proposal, it allows for Albany County to provide fast, convenient access to our recorded documents, basically for the luxury of those individuals that want to obtain this data, either at their office or at home, at their time of day. It could be anytime within the 24-hour period. The fee in order for us to do this will cost Albany County $2,495 with an annual fee of $1,799. The beauty of all of this is that in time, Albany County will start basically reaping the benefits of this project by getting fees back for all of those users that want to basically get into our system and retrieve the data for their own personal use. I can tell you that we have been working very, very hard with ArcaSearch along with Adam from IT and Jennifer for her review of this proposal so that we're able to get this up and running. In the past, you allowed us to basically enter into a contract with IDOC where we're receiving funds, allowing the public to go into the market and get this. This will allow, basically those documents were from 1997 forward. With ArcaSearch, we're going back to the beginning of time and allowing the public to gather the data that they're searching and get this for their assistance. What we have done or will incorporate with your approval, basically a suggested price range for a fee schedule for a 1-day, 24-hour pass, it would be $20. For 1 week, which is 77 days, weekly pass will be $40. For 1 month, it would be $100. And for 1 year, it would be $750. I'm basing these proposed fees with my colleagues around the state of Wyoming, actually in Laramie County. For comparison, their 1-day pass is $25. Their 1 week pass is $50. Their yearly pass is $1,000. And certainly I know they have more records than what we do. And so in looking at Laramie County, Park County, other counties within the state, I believe that our prices are reasonable at this time. And in the future, that cost may change, but the benefit is that we will be retrieving some of those expenses that were incurred in order for us to do this project. So at this time, I'm asking for consideration for the approval of this e-commerce proposal between Albany County and ArcaSearch, and also approve what we believe is our fee schedule that will best accommodate the needs of the public. And I have to reference back to when we initially started this, I received positive feedback from a couple of the attorney's office who said, what a convenience you are not only providing for us as a service when we do our research, but also to the general public who just wants to go in and do their own personal research. And so I'm happy to report I'm more than honored that you allowed this project to basically start, and now it's come to fruition, and now we can reap the benefits by applying all of the resources and making it convenient to the public for which we serve.
Thanks, Jackie. Commissioners, any questions?
Jackie, historically, did we not collect fees?
Historically, no, we had 25 cents a copy. So, but you had to come into the office in order to do that. And so, you know, for title companies, and attorneys who do more research in our office, it was a burden for them to wait until we opened our doors and only have basically 8 hours a day to do their research. And so going from 25 cents a copy now to be able to give them online service where it's fast, it's convenient, it's, you know, to their benefit. I'm happy to report that Albany County is one of those counties that's able to do so. Not all the counties in the state of Wyoming are able to do this. And so I feel very fortunate that we are.
Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the e-commerce proposal between ArcaSearch and Albany County.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you something really interesting about this. So basically the concept is we're going from a bricks and mortar land office to a 24/7 virtual land office, right? And I had somebody called me and complained they didn't like that because they didn't want to pay $20 for a day pass or whatever. And I thought to myself, man, I can't get down to the courthouse for $20 in fuel in my time. And this was a person who didn't live in the county. And so I'm thinking to myself, for $20, it can come to you. If you don't live in this county, you can't get to it for $20. So I couldn't understand the complaint. I was very polite and kind, but I couldn't understand the complaint. It's always better when you save time. And I'm going to guess that it's going to help us internally. You're going to be able to retask land office people to do other important things in the clerk's office. Is this all cloud-based or is there an IT component to it?
This is probably a better question that IT can answer. I believe it's all cloud-based, but their component, they also have to be involved because, of course, with the amount of documentation that's out there, they will continue to look to make sure that as we continue to find ways of providing more information to the public outside of the land documents, if there are other documentations that we come across that are outside of what has already been scanned and digitized, it may involve the IT department. I did fail to mention to you, ArcaSearch is very much interested in giving the Board of County Commissioners a demonstration, not only for allowing to see how you can access these records for just so that you can engage with the public and help us get the word out, but also they just digitized all of the Board of County Commissioners proceedings. And now when David or his staff or the county assessor staff or anyone who wants to research minutes of the Board of County Commissioners, basically they can do it at their computer and not have to come in and pull those books and look for references or look at old records. Chuck Miyake.
Some super fancy subject searches. I'm sure there's a magnifying glass where you can type in keywords or whatever.
You can type in any keyword, and we've already used it in-house. We were just looking last week for, I'm trying to think, Kayla, what were we looking for? That she typed in a key, one of the resolutions that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And so she typed up resolution, and every single resolution way back since the beginning of time appeared, and we were able to narrow down our search and get exactly what we needed. And so if that's amenable, I know your next Board of County Commissioners meeting is on July 20th. If we can schedule the demo to just have the demo between 5:30 and 6 p.m. before your meeting starts, Chuck is happy to make arrangements so that we can get on and you can look at not only the land documents, but how you can retrieve and search any of the records of the Board of County Commissioners.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
I'm all
totally.
for it. Yeah, let's put
Pretty
it
cool.
on. Yeah.
Commissioner Richardson, can I ask you to amend your motion to include approving the fee schedule that Jackie?
Oh, yeah.
said?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would like to, I move to amend, or I move to amend my motion to include the fee schedule described.
Second agree.
Agrees.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. It's super exciting, and to come under budget and to have that access, it's really great. I think that, in light of cybersecurity, that some of this will be hosted if not all of it, off of our web, of our network, which makes all those constant searches not something you have to worry about the security issue on. That's ARCA's deal. So 25, set special meeting on the rail tie wind project application. The last meeting, the public hearing was on June 1st, 2021, 45 days later, makes that meeting or that decision have to be done by July 16th. What are your pleasure next Tuesday night? What is your thought?
Next Tuesday night works great for me.
I think it's totally fine. When you look here. That would be the 13th day.
Are we talking like 6?
Yeah. And I'm hopeful that we can get the district court again. That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's make that next. Then does that gives us enough time notice wise? Does it, Jackie? Okay. So let's make that special meeting for the rail tie wind application, July 13th, 6 o'clock here at the courthouse, hopefully the district court. So if we can't find that, I guess we'll find another suitable place to put it.
And we don't need a motion for that.
Nope. Okay. 26, approved vouchers for June 2021.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the vouchers for June 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Seeing no business before the county commission on July 6, 2021 at 12:18, I'm adjourn the meeting. Thank you all, and I appreciate it. And we'll see you next week, if not sooner.
So that's the 13th. Did we say
6.
6?
See you, David.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you. Nice to meet you, Jory.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. No, that's totally fine. Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, you waited till the very end? I could have texted you that.
I wanted to hear that.
You want to know your application in the mail, or do you want to wait until it's? Paul will sign it, or he will sign it here.
Oh, okay.
I will.
Yeah, I will right now.
Wait a couple minutes.
Yeah.
I do like the art. It's pretty modern, which probably wouldn't have spoken to my. I'm probably too conservative. I would have wanted something more conservative, right? More traditional. But we have all kinds of that stuff around here. Too much of it, probably. So I'm glad they did that.
So Kayla, I'm not sure what else
Y'all
you
have
guys need
Jackie
to do.
sign it, and I can run upstairs and real quick.
Okay. She hasn't looked at it yet, but she said if the commissioners can sign it, then it's on this one, she can. Okay. You want to walk us through the call? Yep, Paul. Yep, yeah, and we'll take care of all.
See you, Paul.
Jackie, I don't know if there's somewhere that this could be set where people could just look at it, like while they're waiting in line in the office. I don't know. But it might be interesting to the public to be able to see. Or maybe they would want to see all of the verbiage, the pictures for sure. I don't know.
The gentleman that you referenced about wanting to be contacted me again, so I was waiting until the approval of this. I was gonna ask him if he would be interested in the now the services that we offer, so that he can go ahead and get what he needs. at his convenience.
Well, how did he get it before?
The same way, well, having to have somebody come in and do the research. And he's from that state.
Right, so, but
State.
did he? Is there somebody in town who does that for, like, as
You
a
can get-
service?
Yeah, you can get some people, title companies will come in and do it.
But how would a title company do it for less than what
They
our
would-
fee
they
schedule?
couldn't. They couldn't.
You
But
can't
he
pay
just-
somebody to do that.
But he, you know what I told him, if I allow for one for him, I have to allow for all. And, but then I
Because he
was
just
willing-
wanted free access, right?
Right.
Let's work
But there's a cost to provide that service.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't do it if it didn't
Did
save
you guys meet
inside
with
the
Judy and Mark?
Yes,
Okay.
did you?
Oh, they stayed with me.
Yep, yeah. They were the people that, oh, I'm sorry about that, Vince.
Yeah, she said DTC was one of the first four that they set up, and it's probably her favorite one.
Yeah, she said that to us. We had it all.